Meant to be live streaming a bit, but I want to get this video out, so if it's rushed slightly, forgive me for that. There's a bit of editing I want to throw in here as well, just to make it very clear how I feel about the situation. So I don't know what the hell's going on in the Labour Party and what's going on with Rayna specifically, but she's been just absolutely slammed over this last week, because she's gone to the trade union conference, and a lot of the stuff she has said, or at least some of it, has been backtracked on very quietly in kind of the last few days in press briefings. And I don't know what the disconnect is going on between Rayna and the rest of the party, or if they're just setting her up to look silly. But Jesus Christ, this is embarrassing, especially her smug delivery here, given what we know now. And, I was going to do a video on kind of Labour, kind of at least this thing's positive. But, luckily for me, midweek recording is a nightmare. So let's go on to the video.
Congress, there's even more. Day one basic rights. A ban on zero-hour contracts. An end to fire and rehire. Family-friendly working. Strengthened sick pay, making it available to all workers, including the lowest earners. And from day one, we'll go faster and quicker to end the gender pay gap, address unequal pay, tackle sexual harassment at work, and put mental health on a par with physical health.
Okay, so very ironic given that some of this stuff's been backtracked on. Very ironic that Dr. Khan resigned from the shadow cabinet because Starmer has downplayed, mental health. So great stuff here. Also the fact that there is an alleged harasser within the Labour front bench. I believe that person is still there. And so, for Labour to take this stuff apparently so seriously when they're not even taking it seriously now in opposition, a bit scary. But, a quick couple of U-turns here. So Rayna speaking to the TUC conference about sick pay. Labour report are very accurate, Labour list report, saying that, quote, Labour is no longer committed to raising sick pay rates or extending it to the self-employed, end quote. So, clearly they've watered that down already. We go to the BBC. There is a ban proposed for only exploitative zero-hour contracts. If workers welcome flexibility themselves, it would not be prevented. So what you're going to have a situation is that employers are going to put pressure on employees to say, these zero-hour contracts are not exploitative, therefore they should stay. This is the dumbest thing ever. Do you think workers are going to be like, you know what, bro, that's kind of exploitative. I don't really want that. We live in a country where employment is very precarious. Especially in the gig economy. So for them to have watered this down, especially given how smug her delivery was, wow, within the space of a couple of days, damn, Rayna, they clearly do not like you in the party, do they? God damn. And, it's been a rough week for Rayna, and we'll talk about some of the more of the clips, but, how can we trust anything, honestly, the Labour Party say, even if it's in the manifesto at this point? Honestly, I despair. I honestly despair.
The question being of who is going to be lower in tax. What I tell you is that what the Labour Party says before the election is, and what it...
And the fact that she has to kind of stumble and mention the manifesto bit is quite telling here.
Stands on its manifesto. It will, and what it stands on its election is, and what it's...
she kind of like, oh, stuff, oh, crap, we kind of lied a bit here, pre-election, so, we're going to have to mention the manifesto bit, and we don't even know what's going to be in the manifesto, really, apart from the fact that there won't be tax rises on richer people. And, this is Starmer on the two-child benefit cap, and shouts out Susanna Reid, I don't know what the hell's going on, but, she's very quiet, when Piers Morgan was there, but, she's absolutely, she's going for it, and I hope she does this to Tory ministers. Honestly, I think they've done, ITV does a relatively okay job, but she's phenomenal in some of the clips that I've got here.
Because we've already seen that you've done the reverse ferret on the first pledge of your leadership, increase income tax for the top 5% of earners. But there is also this very sensitive issue of the two-child benefits cap. You have said that you will stick to that. It has earned you a very unpleasant name, Sir Kid Starver.
She evidently spends way too much time on Twitter like me as well, so that's not great. So it's pretty funny. So Kid Starver, I can't lie, it's given us a Tory policy, but, he's going to stick with it. Politics is all about decisions, and he is deciding to keep this in place if Labour win.
If we overturned the two-child benefit cap, we could, according to experts, lift 250,000 children out of poverty. Why won't you change your mind on that one?
Well, let me be very clear. We will have an anti-poverty strategy for an incoming Labour government, just as we had one under the last Labour government.
And do you know what don't the Tories have an anti-child poverty strategy? You know, it's not just about, oh, I've got a strategy. You know, we plan to do this. It's like, if your plans aren't enough, your strategies aren't enough, then you're going to fail off the jump. We know New Labour didn't go far enough when it came to child poverty. You know, if you read the Marcus Rashford story, it's enough to tell you that. And it's not to say the Tories are better, and it's absolutely 100% they're worse. But for Labour to come out and say, oh, we've got a plan on child poverty that doesn't include removing the two-child benefit cap, your policy is going to fail off the jump.
But the decision I took in relation to two benefit cap was a tough decision. It was made because I'm not prepared for the Labour Party to make unfunded commitments as we go into the election. We saw with Liz Truss.
This is where it becomes a real fraud here.
In 2020, you said it should be scrapped, though, didn't you? In 2020, you did tweet that it should be scrapped.
Look, there are very strong feelings about this in the Labour Party. I completely accept that. That's why it was a very tough decision. But we saw just about a year ago with Liz Truss what happens when unfunded spending commitments are made. She wanted tax breaks, but it's the unfunding commitment that led to...
It wasn't the unfunded bit that led to this. It was the fact that what happened was she said, oh, you know, I want to borrow money to do tax cuts. And, you know, the people, the people in the markets were like, that doesn't seem like a very good idea because that stuff doesn't work. If you want to do tax cuts, generally they want it to be funded via cuts. You know, these aren't unfunded promises. These are going to be funded via borrowing. That's not unfunded. And the fact that she didn't put it with OBR reports. If you look at the amount we borrowed during COVID and even the amount we're borrowing now, that's not spiking the bond price. So what he's arguing is either he's economically illiterate, which in a guy who wants to be, you know, the future prime minister is a disaster, or he's just lying to people and he's spreading this myth around economics and he's cementing this idea that governments are borrowing money is a bad thing. I just don't get it. Honestly, this is just pure fraudulence, especially when this stuff, you know, lifting this child benefit cap will pay back in itself to an extent, because you're going to have parents who have more money to spend on their kids, and that money goes back in the economy, especially when in the context of him dropping the tax rise on the rich, you know, going back to the 50% tax rate. You know, that's, you could use some of that money to fund getting rid of the two-child benefit cap. You know, this is nonsense. Politics is about decisions, and he's making the decision to keep those children in poverty. He's not the reason these children are in poverty now, but he's making a decision, evidently, that will keep these children in poverty if he comes into power. Or at least that's what he is saying here. We go on, Angela Rayner getting, you know, just a rough old week for her, honestly.
When I most needed it, a council house gave me and my son a secure home instead of sofa surfing.
So it's a good thing you didn't have more than 2 kids, Raina, because you wouldn't have got any benefits if you were under this, under this lot and under you lot as well. You know, if we had another Angela Rayner who had, you know, a couple of kids, you would not be able to get a council house. You will struggle to get one because the Labour Party will not put up more money to get council houses.
You become Chancellor, will you spend taxpayers' money on building houses?
This isn't about spending taxpayers' money. This is about unblocking the planning system. It's about...
So what they're going to do is they're not going to build any more council houses by the sounds of it. So, you know, the next person who wants to be like Angela Rayner or could be like Rayner is possibly not going to receive any enough child benefit support, and is probably not going to have a council house because, you know, under this lot, they're not going to build it. They're not going to fund it. You know, what they're going to do is rely on the private sector to do it. So good luck to any future Angela Rayners out there. And it gets worse for her, honestly, because she's pushing the trickle-down economic nonsense of growing the economy so we can fund public services when you can do it on borrowing. It's not the best way to do it, but it's possible, and it will help the economy if you do it right. You know, Clement Attlee wasn't like, yo, guys, we're going to have to borrow money from the Americans. We're not going to be able to do this.
Conservatives do not have a plan for the future of the UK.
Do you? Because you keep saying you're going to grow the economy. And where's the plan to grow it? You keep saying it, you know, just like Liz Truss did. Not seeing a plan, guys.
We do, and we need to get on with that as quickly as possible, because otherwise we won't be able to commit to investing in public services. We won't be able to commit to the triple lock, because we need to secure the UK finances to pay for that.
Again, it's just a lot of this stuff is just economic illiteracy. You know, there's just more.
So, like I've heard Labour politicians saying that the burden should be held or shouldered by those with the broadest shoulders, those who can afford to pay more, should pay more. And in fact, in his 2020 leadership bid, Keir Starmer said he would increase income tax for the top 5% of earners and increase that top rate of income tax. That was a pledge that he made when he became leader. Is that completely junked?
Yeah, according to Rachel Reeves, I think it is junked.
Well, since that, we've had a Conservative Party that have crashed the economy, and we've seen the highest tax burden on people for a whole...
But again, they're pushing this whole thing of, the highest tax burden, therefore we can't increase taxes on the rich. But the thing is, the people who are paying the higher taxes are lower and middle earners. So this notion that, we've got the highest tax burden on who? Angela Rayner, who is paying this highest tax burden? Because it's not the people who are the mega rich because they've had a tax cut. Come on, man.
Whole generation. So we know that we have to have an industrial strategy, which the government have failed to have at the moment, which is about long-term investment.
These are they call them NPCs in games where they just give stock answers. This is what's happening to Angela Rayner, and it's sad. And this is Susanna Reid just being disappointed. There's another clip, we'll discuss that in a minute. But
in the old days, the Labour pitch would be, we'll increase taxes on those with the broadest shoulders. Angela Rayner wouldn't even say that. Sure. I wanted to say yesterday...
You were very good with it yesterday.
Who are you?
Yeah, you don't want to take credit from a guy called Tory Boy Pierce because he's got an agenda here. But for Susanna Reid, it seems a lot more than just, trying to point score or make politicians look stupid. This looks more personal than anything, in a sense. Not in a bad way personal either.
And what have you done with Angela Rayner? Yeah. Because the usual sort of fire and brimstone and those who earn more should pay more was not there. And interestingly, what she seemed to conclude was the Tory party in government has been a total disaster, so we're going to stick to exactly what they're doing.
Yeah. It's the idea that they're going to just manage things slightly better, and this guy Tory Boy Pierce I think he's agreeing. I think that's his voice there. And the reason he's doing that is because he wants to muddy the waters to make it look like they're both the same, that both parties are the same, therefore voting is pointless, and that kind of helps the Tories win. At least that's kind of how, I think a Conservative would approach it. Honestly, to kind of muddy the waters as much as possible, to kind of create apathy, to kind of stop people from voting. And there's more here, honestly.
Starmer was asked a couple of weeks ago about the Conservative policy to restrict tax credits, universal credit payments for children only to 2 children in a family. We know that restriction has led to a big rise in child poverty already since it was introduced 4 or 5 years ago.
Especially for Rayner, a person who talks about the impact New Labour had on her life and how much it helped her, to kind of go down this road, it's just really dark, honestly.
Why will you not be changing, lifting that 2-child limit? How will you explain to trade union members today why Labour is sticking with the Conservative policy on the 2-child cap and universal credit?
Well, first of all, it's not about sticking to policy, it's about fiscal rules. We've said we will not commit to reversing or doing something without having the finances to back it up. We've also said, because we've looked at the evidence and we...
Could you imagine, by the way, if they did this during COVID, we can't afford to spend money on vaccines and whatever because the fiscal headspace not there, it'd just be an abomination.
Said that we'll bring in free school breakfast. Now, I was a kid on free school meals. It wasn't universal when I was at school. I was one of the children my parents were on income support, so that's why I got free school meals, because it was targeted and I needed it the most. But I spent the whole morning waiting to get to lunchtime because I'd not had anything to eat. So
the free school breakfast thing is good. The Breakfast Club, that's a good thing. Fundamentally, that is a good thing. But there is still this kind of stigma around free school meals. And so by making it universal, it does get rid of that stigma. And it also helps kids, like, not all kids, even if their parents are kind of upper working class or middle class, some parents, they don't like supporting their kids. They genuinely don't. It's very strange, honestly. So, even then, it would help the parents who should do better, honestly. But it's a good policy. The Breakfast Club is a good policy. But not doing more to, kind of... even just change the entitlements on free school meals would be a good thing. Just to increase it so more kids have access to it would be a good thing.
We know that breakfast clubs universally will help every child across the UK.
So it's a bit weird pushing universal breakfast clubs, so not free school meals universally. That's a bit of a strange thing to do.
And we've prioritised that. But we'll also set up a poverty strategy.
And again, this poverty strategy without getting rid of the 2-child cap, how successful is going to be, doubt.
Keir Starmer has said no rise in the top rate of tax and no wealth tax of any kind. How will you explain no wealth tax of any kind to trade union members today?
Because we're trying to secure the economy. We want to see investment in the UK. We want to...
So how does, it's like... Okay, maybe the wealth tax one, sure, but like I doubt they're going to be companies looking at it going, oh my god, they're doing, they're raising the top rate of income tax, so we're not going to go there. Like, come on now. Like, even Sunak said when we had lower corporation tax, like, it didn't help bring in investment. So what, like, just stock answers. And I think Susanna Reid got pretty annoyed with her and asked this.
A revolt. Do you feel? Can I just say, Angela Rayner? This doesn't sound like the Angela Rayner revolt. Do you feel like you're singing from a different song sheet?
Which kind of is, to be fair.
I just wonder whether potential Labour voters, might be watching and thinking, what makes this different? Why does this? How is this? Would this be a Labour pitch?
Because we're going to secure the economy so that I can invest in...
Oh, my days, I've heard this one before. We're going to grow the economy, grow the pie, blah, 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 blah. You sound like Liz Truss.
In public services.
I don't like the way politicians are like, so I can invest. Like, it's not I, it's we. We as a country are going to invest more in public services, not you. You're not going to crack the checkbook out and do this. It's not your money, pal.
Invest in all those things that gave me the help when I was growing up. It's not.
So when is this going to happen? Because growing the economy is going to take time. Fair enough, you're going to manage the money better, or you're saying you're going to do that, right? Fine. How much growth are you actually going to get out of that? And then are you actually going to put that growth into more council housing? Like, who's going to make decisions on where this money goes? Honestly, because I don't have a lot of faith in Rachel Reeves, who we'll get onto in a bit. But this is on the school stuff.
You see what problem is, Mr. Reynolds? You're spending a lot of time telling us that the government's wrong, but you can't ever say you would do something different. And it's hard then to argue with Sharon Graham that, as she implies, there's not much between you and the Tories.
I'm not sure who Sharon Graham is, to be fair.
No, I disagree entirely with two important points on that. First of all, we've got
Okay, so how are you going to deal with the crumbling schools, right? This is going to be a doozy of an answer.
very specific plans where we would do things differently, whether that is the funding that would come to breakfast clubs for every child in the country. Because
so breakfast clubs are going to fix crumbling schools.
So the changes to how we would treat the allowances for private schools and the tax system.
So is that money going to go to crumbling schools?
It is spending the money from scrapping the non-DOMs tax regime and putting more money into the NHS. So we've got very different plans.
We've also heard about the non-DOM tax. Wasn't that meant to help, freeze energy bills? Like, where's this money being allocated to?
But I will make no apologies for coming back to the basic fact that unless the economy grows more strongly, there will be harder challenges. And actually,
so we've heard this one before as well. We need to grow the economy in order to sort this out. I mean, okay, buddy. This is another Labour MP.
Going to reintroduce the building.
Well, I mean, you got to remember we had a big programme to rebuild schools.
Yeah,
yes, past tense, buddy. We had one, 2010 when I was, before I even did my A-levels. Okay.
Going to reintroduce it.
They cut it. Well, Jeremy Hunt came on the show, not your show, the other Sky show on the weekend, and said he's going to step in and give schools the money.
What he's doing.
Yeah, but we're going to hold. He's made that promise. We're going to hold him to account to deliver on.
That's great. We know Jeremy Hunt's going to fail because he's an absolute moron. What are you going to do? That was the question.
Are you going to reintroduce your building programme if you win the next election?
Well, we'll outline that. We'll outline what that in our.
The answer is probably no. Let's be honest. And this is Starmer being cringe.
What do you say to our viewers watching this morning, who think they want more spending, they want the public services boosted, they want things fixed, and they're not convinced that you're prepared to give that money to public services, that you're so determined to prove that you're responsible and prudent that you're not prepared to invest?
Well, let me say this. What you will get with an incoming Labour government is a mission-driven government.
It is my mission.
Yeah, we got missions, bro. Forget pledges, forget all of the other promises. We got missions, bro. I'm Agent Starmer. We're on a mission.
That means a clear sense of what we're going to achieve over 5 years. None of this short-term sticking plaster.
We're on that Joseph Stalin 5-year plans, baby.
Not fixing the fundamentals.
But how do you fix it without spending money?
Fundamentals. What you do is you do spend money, but you have to say where it's going to come from. But you do more than spending money. You also reform. If you look at
how are you going to reform the concrete in the buildings?
Public services. I ran a public service.
Didn't do a great job, by the way.
4 or 5 years in criminal justice. I know it
wasn't his fault because it was underfunded, but that's the point of it. If these departments are massively underfunded, they're not going to be able to do a good job, are they? Even if they're managed better. I mean, you could manage the CPS as well as you wanted, but if you don't have the resources, you're not going to get very far.
That, of course, money improves your public services, and that's why, you know, all Labour governments have put more money into our public services.
Except you're promising not to do that, or at least you're not really looking to do that, are you? Not straight away anyways.
But also reform and change is necessary to modernise and bring forward our public services. But what you'll get is a completely different mindset. No more shortcuts, sticking plasters, a serious long-term plan to fix the fundamental.
He's told us nothing. That was a filler answer. We've got missions, bro. You know, and this one's quite a fun one as well, because Rachel Reeves is like, yeah, she struggles in these kind of interviews, and you know, the guy interviewing her is not even that, like, he's not Jeremy Paxman. Jeremy Paxman would eat a lot of these MPs alive. It wouldn't even be a contest.
Categorically rule out a rise in VAT
I'm
rates.
not going to sit here and write a Labour manifesto.
And, you know, this is in the context of Labour having announced multiple policies on not increasing the top rate of income tax, not changing capital gains, amongst other things. So all she has to say is VAT, increasing VAT wouldn't be the right thing to do. It is a bit of a regressive tax. So we're not going to do that.
On a first Labour budget in your studio, but Keir and me have both said on many occasions...
Wouldn't it be Keir and I?
We would like
But you've
taxes.
ruled out a wealth
Wait a
tax.
second.
Why can't you rule out a rise in VAT?
Keir and I have said on many occasions we want taxes on ordinary working people to be lower. I do not wake up in the morning, think about how I could increase taxes on working people. We'll set out all of those plans. I'm not...
So I'll be waiting for that. But I did find it quite interesting. She said this.
When we make announcements, we do it in our own way, in our own time.
And, you know, the way they do it is they get Rayner to say something, and then they'll immediately, within a few days, go back on whatever Rayner has said, or at least water down what Rayner has said. So, you know, she's right there. They do it in their own way, in their own time, very badly. Rachel Reeves getting absolutely bodied by this dude on the phone lines.
In sort of answer to that last call, or
so the last caller was actually No Justice, which we'll go over that in a minute.
Adding to it, you said you came into politics to change things, and yet all I've heard from you and the front bench is Tory policies for a Tory crisis. You're not going to tax wealth. You're not going to do much with income tax. You're leaving the profits of the banks, the water and the energy untouched. I remember very well, because I was born in that period, the Attlee government.
So this guy would be actually a baby boomer, by the sounds of it?
And what they came in with was a four-letter word, hope. You aren't communicating hope. There is no ambition in evidence in what you're doing. And they had a much harder job than you've got to rebuild the country after the Second World War.
He's right there. You know, the country's GDP was at 200%. They had to borrow enormous amounts of money to build the NHS and kind of rebuild the country. But they managed to do it. It wasn't perfect. You know, they didn't cover dental or eye care. But, you know, it's better than nothing. Like, genuinely, what they did with the NHS is a miracle in its own. So, you know, this argument, oh, there's no money and, oh, we can't do this. The only reason we won't be able to do it is our politicians are inept.
COVID is bad. 2008 was terrible, but austerity has to be stopped. And you seem to be wanting to carry on worshipping the Treasury because you are an ex-banker, Bank of England banker, and you don't seem to be in making any kind of ambition clear to me as a voter or the public as voters, whether you're prepared to rise to these challenges, which are far worse than what we had in World War II.
So what's your actual question?
You know, someone cooked here, and it wasn't Reeves. That guy is just phenomenal. You know, the point he made, you know, it was far worse post-World War II. And yet, you know, that Labour government did try their best. And we got a lot of good things out of them. And some of those things, you know, Attlee's legacy in the NHS lives on here. And this is No Justice talking to Rachel Reeves, which is pretty funny.
So I've got a quote here from a pretty prominent economist. And they say...
I wouldn't say that economist is that prominent.
That Labour needs to provide an alternative for aggressive policies being prioritised by the Conservatives. The banks and those earning more than £100,000 could quite easily contribute a little more, and unless they do, inequality and poverty will inevitably soar in the months and years ahead. Do you agree with that statement?
The way that I believe that you can reduce inequality, reduce poverty, and actually also improve the living standards of ordinary working people, not in poverty, but struggling to get by, is through growing the economy.
So that's, I think, the fourth or third Labour MP they've talked about growing the economy as a way to get out of the problems the economy's in. And growing the economy is important, but again, there are things you have to do to grow the economy, and she's not really talked about what they are going to do to grow the economy.
Because that is the way that we can ensure that working people have more money in their pockets.
It's not even a guarantee. We've actually had growth under the Conservative government, and yet, working people did not really get a massive pay rise. It's contingent on way more factors than just economic growth, especially if you're in the public sector where the government determines your pay.
And we have more money for public services. And one of the real failures over these last 13 years is to grow our economy in all parts of the country, creating those good quality, high paid jobs. So my priority is to get that economic growth back in our...
So, they're pushing growth, and again, Labour are going to have a tough time growing the economy, not just because of Brexit. That will be a massive cap on the success they'll have, but multiple other things that will take a long time to fix. The skills crisis we have in this country, that's arguably it's generational. It will take, a good 10 years to fix a lot of that. And, they do kind of tee up, I think it's Ian Dale, to look really clever here.
Helena's question, the economist that she quoted? That was actually you.
And look at Rachel Reeves' reaction here. She's been caught bang to rights that it's her own quote here.
Well, look.
Things have changed, I guess.
I mean, I want to reduce poverty and inequality. I didn't go into politics. But how do you do that? What are the...
You have a plan which will predominantly, get rid of the factors of poverty, or at least try to, rather than talking about worklessness, which is what John Ashworth, I think it was, spoke about. You have to look at the fundamental factors that are impacted, that are causing poverty. One of those would be the two-child cap.
The practical
well,
things
your
that we can
suggestion
do.
in that quote was to tax the banks more and those earning more than £100,000 more.
There's no better time to tax the banks more because they're making record profits. They're making huge amounts of money because the interest rate rises.
But you've gone back on that.
Well, look, the way that I think that we can lift people out of poverty and reduce inequality, as I say, is to get the economy growing. And that has been the missing ingredient these last 13 years. Now, Phil sort of says, oh, I'm an ex-banker. Yes, I am an ex-Bank of England economist. And the one thing I learned more than anything at the back...
Helena.
Just stop it. Honestly, it's just moronic. And, if we talk about trickle-down economics, which is what she's kind of pushing at, we grow the economy and therefore, the money will trickle down or whatever and we'll create more jobs. There was a guy who actually spoke about how trickle-down economics is a scam. And it wasn't Joe Biden. It wasn't even Bush Senior. It's this geezer here.
£1 million, you got a £55,000 tax break yesterday. That's enough to employ a nurse.
It's more than enough to employ a nurse, to be fair. Nurses don't get paid 55 Gs, bro.
Their politics. Make the rich richer. Make the super rich even richer. And the theory is that if they're made even richer, some of it may one day trickle down into the pockets of other people. It didn't work last time. Trickle down. It's a piss take.
Damn, what happened to this geezer, honestly? What happened to a lot of these people? What happened to Reeves when she talked about doing, the fact that people that make more than 100k can afford to pay more in tax than the banks can? What happened to Angela Rayner? What happened to Keir Starmer? And, this from Sam Bright here. I've mentioned this tweet before, but this is really, really important. Which is politics has radicalised over the last 13 years, but austerity may well be the most radical policy of them all. We've had tens of thousands of deaths, I think, from austerity. Pitched as a sensible, moderate idea, it has nuked our public services and left us with outdated and failing infrastructure. And also the fact that it doesn't even work. Honestly. And Keir Starmer talking about we'll ensure every child can fulfill their potential regardless of their background. We're putting debating and speaking skills at the heart of education, and maybe children will be more able to talk about how they live in poverty now, or continue to live in poverty under New Labour, or Keir Starmer's Labour, I guess. Maybe that's the only benefit we'll have here. Having speaking classes and debating and things like that, it's a good thing. But again, it's not going to be the fundamental difference here. We don't need drawing in the lines. This from kind of Laura Koonsberg, who can apparently do decent work once in a while, and she talks about the problems Labour faces, which is, say you say too much, your plans can get shredded by the media, by other politicians, or nabbed, like it was the windfall tax, the only thing that I think Sunak stole from Labour, but again he made it crap, which Labour failed to really, well, they did mention it on occasion, but should have really gone after it a lot more, or cause grumbles close to home, because once people figure out what you're planning to do, it can cause you problems. But the problem is, if you know, as she says, if you don't say anything, you face accusations, you stand for nothing, you have no ideas for your own, or fundamentally, you will do nothing to change the problems that we face here. And I think that's the main problem. You know, Keir Starmer talking about how the UK has lost control of its borders when we haven't. You know, this is something you expect from Nigel Farage. And again, you know, it's fine. You know, he's attacking the Tories on asylum seekers and things like that, which again is an interesting tactic. Unless, you know, if you're not talking about safe points of entry, it's not really going to help that much when you think about it. All you're doing is making this debate more toxic, because you're cementing in the public's idea that we've lost control of our borders and we need to do something dramatic, and they're not going to have faith that Labour are going to fix it. They're going to go to reform. Let's be honest now. And people like Richard Tice will run with quotes talking about how we've lost control of our borders. So not only are Labour trying to cement the idea that by growing the only way to kind of fix the problems we face is by growing the economy, they're also kind of adding to this notion that the UK has kind of lost control of its borders. You know, Susanna Reid tags him on freedom of movement and, you know, how, you know, he lied about that, but that one's not fundamentally important. But, you know, you had Europeans scoffing at Labour's plan for a bespoke immigration deal. You had one geezer this week talking about how maybe, you know, Labour can get a bespoke deal on, you know, returns and things like that. Best of luck with that, buddy, honestly. You know, I did try and Google, you know, because these guys don't actually talk about, you know, they don't leave sources. They don't talk about what their sources of information are. So Labour, safe points of entry for refugees. Apparently the Trade Union Congress did mention it. There's something the TUC actually wanted. But when I looked around for it, I couldn't find anything on it. Maybe I'm wrong. You know, again, if they left sources, I wouldn't be trying to figure out what the hell they're talking about. So Labour have talked about how they're going to, you know, have a returns policy with the EU, amongst other things. You know, the UK are looking to join the EU's Frontex scheme, which I think non-EU members can be part of. I'm not sure. I'll have to do a bit more digging on that if I do a video on it. But fundamentally, you know, what have we learned here? What have we learned here? As I'm late for my stream because I'm doing this video, it's just they have no real answers. They all say the same thing because they're all coached on the same thing. It's very much like footballers are, game of two halves, you know, glad I scored, but 3 points and blah, blah, blah. And it's just creating more and more kind of apathy.
And his apathy is being transferred directly into his brain, which...
In my opinion. And for me, you know, it kind of... I don't like doing these videos. I don't get a lot out of doing these videos, I'll be honest. They don't do as well. I could do other videos that are way easier than this 32-minute video that I've done so far. It's just... This apathy feeds into the channel, for me. It feeds into my life, and I hate it. I hate being this invested. You know, this idea that, you know, people criticising Starmer because, you know, they want fundamental change, but they don't know what true, you know, being poor really is like. I dare you to say it to my face. I challenge anyone, Labour Social, any of these people, right, who, you know, Tansky or whatever their names are, you know, Graham Hughes, all of these people, right, come to the channel. I'll be on your platform, you come to my platform, we can dual stream it, whatever. I'll happily argue this stuff with you. I'll happily do this. I will drop the gauntlet, you know, Sunday roast, whatever, wherever you want it to be. I will be there no matter what. You do it, you know, according to my schedule, because obviously I'm working. You know, I'll be there no matter what, in the words of Kylian Mbappe. Because I'm sick of this. I'm sick of this idea that, you know, fair enough, so, some of the people on Novara Media, you know, I think Grace Blakely, they come from wealth or whatever, so they don't understand what poverty is, you know, that's why they're criticising Labour and blah, 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 whatever these arguments are, right? Come. Because honestly, you'll get smoked. 100% I'll smoke you in a debate, because this is nonsense. They're pushing effectively austerity, let's be honest now. Why would I want George Osborne 2.0? Less Riz David Cameron. Let's be honest now. These are... I'd rather listen to David Cameron give a speech, because these guys have got nothing. There's no oratory skills here. Maybe, you know, Keir Starmer needs to go to one of these debate classes, because he's boring.
Oracy and debating is a really...
Okay, there's some kid.
The difference between getting that job or not getting that job.
Which is true, you know, being good in interviews and things like that fundamentally are good, but you know what else helps? You know, having a school system that actually gives you more skills rather than just academics, you know, maybe more vocational skills. Instead of pushing the academically challenged kids into vocational skills, maybe we look at Germany and the way they do apprenticeships, because from what I've heard, apprenticeships are actually quite coveted over there. If you get an apprenticeship, it's a big deal. In this country, you get paid like £3 an hour if you're doing an apprenticeship. Who wants to do that? There's just so much fundamental change we could make here, and that's what we need here. You know, Clement Attlee didn't draw within the lines here. Clement Attlee went big. you know, and his legacy lives on to this day. Ask yourself, which one of these Labour politicians, right, in Starmer's current group, whose legacy is going to live on 50, 60 years after they're gone? Which one? Honestly, none. Because these guys have no ideas. These are the reincarnation of, you know, George Osborne's political career. I just can't. I'm struggling here, and you know, at some point maybe I felt bad for Raina, but again, you know, she's deciding to stay there, and they're making her look like a fool. You know, all the time they're briefing against her. She's kind of back a bit and started briefing against them. But this is not a political party that is stable. This is just tragic. But anyways, I'm gonna leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.